Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Sunday Night Live with me, Jonny Lipsham, here in Jonny Lipsham Studios in Gobridge, in Scotland, Midlothian, capital of the world, because Scotland is the greatest nation on earth. Every true Scot knows that. I'm kidding. I'm not really a crazy nationalist. I just like to make silly jokes. So there we go. A big thank you to my good friend producing in the box, my good friend Andrew, who was kind enough to point his entire audience on his stream to this one. So thank you very much. I appreciate that a lot. That was very kind. Anyways, I hope everybody has had a great week. It's been a good week here. Been a busy one, but been a good one nonetheless. I am a very happy bloke at the moment, and I've got some big things coming up. Family related. It's my daughter's 13th birthday next weekend. So yes, I will have a teenager in the house, and possibly worse than that, a teenage daughter in the house, which will be entertaining. So I'm kind of looking forward to that, but kind of not looking forward to that as well. But yeah, so that's kind of big family event that is coming up. But gotta say, if you've not checked out Andrew's show, Andrew's channel, in fact, over at Producing in the Box, it's a really good channel where he talks about making music entirely inside the DAW. Which is a challenge in and of itself, and just not using any external gear. I used external gear for quite a lot of my career, until maybe about 10 or 12, I have to think about this, maybe about 12 or 13 years ago, actually, when I pretty much abandoned tape machine, because I used to do everything in a hybrid fashion. I recorded everything to tape and then brought it from tape into Cubase, which is what I used at the time. And that was the way I worked. I recorded to tape primarily, and then I synced digital elements to tape. So they were in sync with each other, which is fun, challenging. But when it works great. So I worked in a hybrid fashion tape. So I did all my audio recordings of real instruments to tape, and then I combined that with elements from the digital domain for MIDI and things like that. And that's how I worked. I worked like that from about 1989, show my age now, 1988, 89, all the way through to about 2010. When I finally gave up my tape machine because the thing was a pain in the arse to maintain, and tape was really expensive, still is really expensive, and so I eventually got rid of it in 2010, and so I now pretty much do everything entirely inside the DAW, and switched to Studio One myself from Cubase in 2013, and I now work for the company that makes Studio One. I work for Personas, which is great. It's a dream job, actually, to work for a company that makes audio products. I mean, who wouldn't want a gig like that? And so yeah, it's great. I love it. And so yeah, so what Andrew does over on his channel is really, really cool, really good stuff. And he was really putting himself out there on his show this evening, basically combining two styles of music into the same song live in front of his YouTube audience. That takes some cojones to do that, I can tell you. That's crazy, but well worth doing. So I would definitely recommend that you go check out his channel and subscribe. It'd be great to see him get through 3,000 subscribers, which I don't think he's at that point yet. So, and yes, and we have a link to his channel there as well. So please go don't do it now, please. wait until the end of the show and then go and hit his channel and subscribe and hit notification bell so you don't miss anything that he does, because he's doing some really good stuff over there. All right, so let's go up to the top and see who we have here after my wee preamble. All right, we got Billy Morgan is here, Sean Aaron is here, Kyle Traduziak, and Bob's New York, and John Hawk, and the Anonymous Housewife. That is a great name for a band, actually, gotta say. I think that is actually a great name for a band. Who has the question, the first question, and my good, awesome, faithful sponsor, Alps Media LLC, is in the house, and also my personas, aka Rich Cresswell, who is a great dude down in England, one of my really good friends, and Don Oliver is here as well, and as of course producing in the box, my friend Andrew as well. Morton Calland is here from Oslo, which is cool. Liking the fact that we're getting Europeans over here, because this is incredibly late for you. It's like after 1 o'clock in the morning for you folks over in Europe. So I very much appreciate you coming and staying up so late to check out my show, in particular. Because for folks in the United States, it's tea time. And here in Scotland, it's after midnight. And over in Europe, in Central Europe, it's like after 1 o'clock in the morning. You guys are nuts. And I appreciate you immensely. Thank you. Who else do we have here? Tony Stringer is here as well, which is great. He's been around my channel for a very long time. Charles Dillon is here as well. Awesome, Charlie. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to the show. Glad you are here. I think you are new. I don't recall seeing your name. And you are from Perth, Australia, which is awesome because I have family in Perth. Expats from Scotland, actually ironically from Perth, Scotland, who now live in Perth, Australia, which is awesome. They've been there for years, and they occasionally make their way back to the motherland, and as they did, I think maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. But I have yet to make the trip down to Perth, Australia to see them, but that would be awesome to do that. But for you, I think it's probably lunchtime or something like that. But I'm glad you're here. And Shorty Beard is here as well. And I think we have reached the bottom there because Billy Morgan is definitely here. And he was putting in the link to Producing the Box channel. And Dave has a question, apparently, which I'll get to in just a minute. I don't see his question because I don't think he put the at Jonny Lipsham at the start of your question, which I would appreciate it if you do. If you do have a Studio On question or any kind of music orientated question, type at Jonny Lipsham Studios first. And what that does is that for me, you don't see it, but I see it in the chat. It highlights my name in red, and then I know that you have a question, and I can separate it from the rest of the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to spend like ages going, oh, where's the questions? Where's the question? And I don't want to have to do that. So, I have to go find that question, and I'm aware also of the Anonymous Housewife's question, because you did the sensible thing, and you did that. You tagged me in the question, which means I can definitely see it. So I want to try and find Dave's question as well, and I'm not seeing it. No, I don't see it. I do not see Dave's question. Nope. Trying to find it. Yeah, you're going to have to type it in again because I can't sit here for ages. Okay. All right. Rich has found it. He says, an idea, if you run out of questions, is it muscle memory or is it brain retention? It's actually both, for different reasons. Muscle memory, we call it muscle memory, but obviously it comes from your brain because your brain is sending the messages to your muscles. It's less active. It's more passive in a sense, because you're not specifically focused on sending that information to your fingers. Your fingers are just doing what they have done repeatedly. So it's like, it's like breathing. You don't actually think about, I must breathe in and now I must breathe out. You just do it. It's just something that just happens. So in a similar way, it's kind of the same kind of thing. All right, let's get to the first question, which was to do with harmonics and how they relate to synthesizer sound creation. Now, I know pretty much nothing about synthesizer sound creation. That is not my domain at all. I have paid literally no attention to it because, and here's the reason why, it's because fundamentally analog synthesizers are out of tune. They just are. It's just the way that form of synthesis actually works. They tend to be out of tune, or they tend to go out of tune very quickly. I know this because I have a friend of mine who works specifically in synthesis and synthesizers, and he tells me he can do a really, really good take, but then kind of fluff it towards the end of the take. And so when he wants to go and do another pass on that so that he can, improve the take, or even if he wants to go punch in, by the time he sets it up to punch in, the instrument's out of tune. He has to tune it up. And then he'll do the punch in, having forgotten what he did. So, yeah. And so that kind of turned me off synthesizers pretty much entirely. I'll say that. However, harmonics I can talk about. For every fundamental note, there is an harmonic series. And all of those are what we would call overtones. Now, you can find some of these overtones fairly easily by, certainly, for instance, on a stringed instrument, by laying your finger very gently at certain points on the string and then pluck or bow the string, and you'll hear the overtones, the harmonics, rather than the fundamental note. You kind of are muting, to some degree, muting the fundamental tone and allowing those harmonics to come through. Now, there are a lot of harmonics in harmonic series that make up the fundamental tone. And what you'll find is the higher you go up in that harmonic series, actually the more out of tune they become. Out of tune to our Western ears they become. And so there are some forms of intonation, and there are some forms of temperament in music from different parts of the world, different cultures, that actually rely upon those upper harmonics to make their pitches, which is why you get things like microtones and stuff like that. Now, to somebody who is entirely invested their music listening and musical conditioning to Western music, that's going to sound pretty out of tune and maybe even not very pleasant and hard to understand, hard to listen to, because these notes are kind of between what we would call semitones, kind of related, but harmonics are basically those upper partials of the fundamental tone. I don't want to get too deep into that right now because I could probably talk for a good couple of hours just on the subject of harmonics, how useful they are, not just for tuning instruments, but how useful they are for finding all sorts of things out about how music works, and about how temperament works, and about how intonation of an instrument works. But that's a good question. Harmonics are very, very interesting, and certainly worth doing some research on to find out how they work and how valuable they are to creating music, because they are really, really valuable. For example, the French composer Olivier Messiaen, who was an organist, but he was also a composer. One of the things he did was he made a book, actually, that's a series of organ pieces that were his transcriptions of bird song. Now, here's the thing. In order for him to be able to accurately imitate the bird song that he was hearing and basically transcribe it for the organ, he had to basically do half stops, which is where you pull the stop out halfway. And when you do that, it creates harmonics. It brings harmonic overtones out that you don't ordinarily hear from certain types of pipes in the pipe organ. So, for example, flute pipes and reed pipes, if you half stop, you get harmonics instead of the fundamental tones. And so that's how he was able to create these phenomenally complex works that are basically transcriptions of birdsong that he heard when birds would just come into his garden. They would start singing and he would start writing it down. And they're really, really complex works. But here's the thing. It does use microtones because of those harmonics. And because some of these harmonics on a pipe organ are actually slightly out of tune, they're maybe a little sharp or they're maybe a little flat compared to fundamental tones. But they're really interesting works. So harmonics can be really, really useful for actually creating pieces of music. And then, of course, there's the bass player Jaco Pastorius, who wrote a bass solo piece that uses harmonics a lot. And he plays them really, really fast. And actually uses the harmonics to create chords, as well as fundamental tones for playing accompaniment for that, like bass notes. But yeah, as that relates to synthesizer creation, no idea. It's not my domain at all. But it's a good question. I like it. And Dave's question, I think I also kind of hinted on as well there. But it's a good one. Would you then introduce the higher harmonics to bring in some edge to the sound? Maybe, but harmonics are not they're not oscillators. They are overtones of a fundamental note. Now, you can exaggerate them, and you can certainly use EQ to exaggerate some of those upper harmonics, for sure. And you'll find that there are kind of two sorts of harmonics. There's odd harmonics and there are even harmonics, and that's to do with the mathematics of frequencies and the mathematics of pitch, that makes certain harmonics odd and certain harmonics even. It's to do with their wavelengths and that kind of thing. Gets a little bit complicated, for sure. But yes, please do put at Jonny Lipsham Studios before your question. That way I can separate your questions from your general interaction with each other, which I would, I still want to very much encourage. For sure. But yeah, that's a good one. Good questions, everybody. Keep them coming, because we're 21 minutes into the show. And it would be great if we could get some more questions in, because those are really good ones to start with. Harmonics, complicated subject, really, really fascinating subject, really, really interesting subject, and definitely worth doing a little bit of Googling on, and maybe even search out some YouTube videos that go into a bit more depth, because actually there are some really good ones that go into a bit more depth on harmonics and the harmonic series and how it works. And you can also, if you actually do an image search, specifically an image search in Google for harmonic series, you'll find that there are actually some images of some really useful harmonic series diagrams that will show you fundamental notes and then all of those harmonic overtones that make up the fundamental note. Because actual notes are really complicated. When I just play that note, that's not just a G, that's a G plus a whole bunch of other overtones above it and below it. But because the fundamental tone is so strong for the most part, what we hear is this note. Let's see, Morton has a question. And he says, what is your most important start from scratch when sitting down with Studio One? Depends what you're wanting to accomplish with Studio One. Are you wanting to make music? Are you wanting to record? Are you wanting to do sound design? Are you wanting to do something with Foley, so sound effects? So you're wanting to do some production on sound effects? Or Are you wanting to do narration for a TV or a radio commercial or an audiobook? So it kind of depends upon what your objective is when you're sitting down, because sitting down and opening Studio One, you know, it's too broad a concept. You know, what is your objective? What are you doing? What's you know, what's your creative modus operandi is basically what I'm asking. So I have answered your question with a question, because it's important to know why you are opening Studio One, what your objectives are. Always have an objective to what you do, an intentionality about what you do when you are being creative. I know some people, they just you know, I have friends who are artists, and they just sit down and they pick up a pencil and they draw the first thing that comes into their mind. And that's how they work. They kind of improvise their works. And there's nothing wrong with that. I would certainly absolutely encourage people that aren't familiar with just improvising something to improvise something. Andrew did that in his show. He basically mashed up metal with kind of a hip hop kind of chilled vibe, which I actually thought was really, really cool. Kind of aggressive with chill. You know, put those two things together, and kind of what kind of emotion becomes the dominant emotion, what becomes the dominant sound, how well does aggression and kind of chill, kind of, how do those two things sit together? Interesting experiment. And then, you know, as I think I said in Andrew's chat there, you know, hey, you know, why don't you just, you know, mash those two things up and then get a sample of a Kenny G solo that happens to be in C minor and stick it on top and see what you come out with. I mean, that could be quite entertaining. For sure. But yeah, what are your objectives and what are your intentions? You know, if your intention is to just make a song, then sit down, open a song. Are you going to use loops, or are you going to start recording with some instruments, with some real instruments, or are you going to use some virtual instruments, and go from there? Especially if you're wanting to just improvise a piece like Andrew did. Actually, Andrew's kind of inspired me that maybe I should do that on a Sunday night for a show. Why not? Why not just open a brand new song and go, let's just make something from scratch? Kind of did that maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and what resulted was a piece that even, I think it was you guys actually titled it. I'm going to see if I can find it. I'm not seeing it right now, but I think we called it Cassiopeia Files because it sounded like a TV detective series theme tune, and I'm trying to find it. I can't find it. If I can find it, I'll play it. And basically it was composed entirely of suggestions from you guys. Where is it? Because that'd be so good if I could just play that. I'm not finding it. That's annoying. Let me see if I can open it up in here. Found it. Yeah, here it is. I'll play a little snippet of it. There you go. And actually, that started out with just a drum loop. And we built it from there. And then you guys in the chat suggested kind of what we should add, and kind of helped me kind of form the structure for the piece. So kind of, I kind of did what I was told by you guys. But certainly I quite like the idea of just doing a piece, just making up something completely spontaneous in Studio One and see what we come up with. That could be quite entertaining. Let's see. Kyle says many instruments can play the same exact note. How the note is generated, pluck, bow, etc., and the harmonics generated by the actual instrument is how we can tell different instruments apart. That's a really good point, and certainly the texture of certain instruments and the playing technique applied will make a big difference to how a certain note sounds. So everybody could play a G, but brass instruments are going to sound different, not just because they're brass, but because of the way the brass instrument is blown. You don't just go into an instrument, you actually go into the instrument. You make a fart sound into the instrument, which is why brass players are the butt of everyone's jokes, because they get to fart professionally with their mouths. It's, why not? So that's going to sound different to a woodwind instrument where there's a reed or a double reed that's involved and you pass the air over the reed. It's the reed that vibrates, and then you putting your fingers over the finger holes or pressing the keys down that changes the pitch. And of course, string instruments where you're either plucking the strings or you're bowing the strings. And you can pluck a G and you can bow a G, and it will sound the same pitch, but it'll sound different. It's a different texture. So that's an important point. And of course, those different techniques will accentuate different parts of the harmonic series. So that's definitely a thing. It's a good point. Andrew at Producing the Box says, is the vocoder in Studio One reliant on Mai Tai? I can seem to get it work without Mai Tai. I think you can use pretty much anything to make it work. You can use an audio source. You can use presence. I think Gregor has a really, really good video where he uses a drum set, and he uses a drum loop, and he runs it through the vocoder to kind of use the vocoder to bring out some different excitement from the drums. But yeah, you can use kind of any source going sidechained into the vocoder. But Mai Tai works really, really well. I have a song that I made especially for Studio One 6 where I did use the vocoder using Mai Tai. But you can use anything.
This vocoder, it's really very cool. It's the best thing Chrysalis has ever done. It really flows my boat.
But yeah, you can use pretty much anything for doing some creative stuff with vocoder, for sure. But yeah, Mai Tai is a really good way to make it work, but you can pretty much use any source. Let's see, what else is there? Charlie Dillon says, I got it to work as a plugin on a Vox track without Mai Tai. And it will work just as a plugin, that's for sure. With or without Mai Tai. Let's see. Deer Creek is here. Hello, Chris. Good to see you. He says, have you ever heard any discussion about making selected fader channels wider whilst leaving the rest in thin mode versus all channels either or? Well, you can certainly do that kind of already in Studio One. It's not something I like particularly. I like this kind of fat view, but you can make them all skinny and you can double click the selected channel to make them wide, and you can double click to make them narrow. So let's say I want this piano to be nice and wide, and I want the Mai Tai one to go away. You can certainly do that. So basically you just put it into thin mode, and then you double click the channel to make it wide. And you can just double click it again to make it narrow. You can make that short, and then you can double click that one to open up the side panel view, which is quite an interesting one. Quite a different way of working, but yeah, it's not really how I like to work. I like this view where you've got wide and tall. So you've got the inserts and sends above the channels, and I like the channels to be nice and wide. That's my personal preference, but you can do either. Let's see. Orchestral classical music is full of harmonics. Yes, it most certainly is, especially if you get into the music of film composers. Particularly actually good orchestral film compositions for horror films make use of harmonics all the time. Why? Because harmonics can produce a really spooky sound. Especially if you like have really high harmonics on first violins, one guy playing a G, the other guy playing a G sharp, and then the person below them playing a playing a D or something, then the person below them playing a B flat, and you get this, all harmonics rather than open tones, and it just sounds weird and spooky. Especially if you get them to kind of slide their finger ever so slightly so they're actually creating a really wide vibrato. That definitely sounds weird, for sure. And another thing that sounds weird is take a crash cymbal, put it on a cymbal stand, then grab a double bass bow and bow the cymbal. That's a weird sound. Another one to do is have a timpani mallet in one hand and a drumstick in the other. Strike the cymbal. Basically, point the tip of the drumstick into the cymbal, and then rotate the cymbal. So you strike, and then you rotate the cymbal, and you get this weird sound, which is utterly glorious. And actually, you hear that sound in movies all over the place, because it's such a weird sound. So definitely worth looking at that. Let's see. Great content pouring out your channel regularly. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Really good stuff over at Andrew's channel, for sure. Shorty Beard says you can just stick vocoder on any track as an insert and it just works. It most certainly does. You don't have to use the sidechain feature. You can use it in its own internal internal way of working, for sure. So I go back to this open song here and go and grab vocoder. Where are you, vocoder? Hello, vocoder, where are you? Of course, you begin with V, so you're all the way down the bottom. And if I was to select something, now I don't know how well this is going to work. I think do I need to
this here, and now you should still be able to hear me. But this time I should be coming straight through the vocoder if I set this to internal, got that set up. Go with that. Hello, let's see. I don't know if you can hear me or not. But yeah, so you can just use it just as an insert, and it should just work. I don't know how effective that's going to be because I actually can't hear it coming through. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how well that worked because I had to mute my mic because I can't hear what's coming through Studio One with the vocoder. But yeah, hopefully that works. Now if I turn that off, there we go. Now you should just be able to hear me or just normal. Chris says, when you have a red channel color, have you ever had any issues with not seeing the record button? Nope. Not at all. No, I mean, my bus channels are all red. Like if I go and open up a different song, for example, if I go and open up this guy here, yeah, okay, so that's what it sounded like. Okay, that's what I was hoping it would sound like. All right, so if I open up the console here and go all the way across here. See, all my buses here are red, and the record button is white unless I'm actively recording. But I know where to find it. I know that the record button is always in the transport bar, so it's not really a problem. So, yeah, and they're different shades of red as well. Worked beautifully. Cool. Okay. You could hear me perfectly. Yes, so it does work. I know why I couldn't hear it. It's because I have the speakers turned down really, really quietly, so that the speakers don't bleed back into the mic. But yeah, that's why I couldn't hear it. But I'm glad that worked. Yay! Small triumphs. How often do I do lives? I do lives. My Sunday night live show is every Sunday and has been every Sunday for the last, I think, 6 years. I think somebody who has been around for a very long time will be able to confirm how long it's been on. I think I have done this show for about 6 or 7 years, pretty much every Sunday, and I don't think I have missed many Sundays. I think it's been pretty much every Sunday for all of that time. It used to be pretty awful. Not in terms of the content, but in terms of the quality of picture and that kind of stuff. Because when I first started the show, I had a very, very, very rudimentary rig for doing shows. Because I also had really awful bandwidth for internet. And so it was really hard going those first, couple of years. And then I moved in 2018 to a new house, and we had so much better broadband, faster by a country mile faster. And that meant that I could do the show pretty much exactly as I'm doing it now. And then we are in this house. We've been in this house since last summer. So in fact, summer of 2021. And we're going to be, this is our final home. This is our permanent home. So, you're going to get pretty bored with looking at this backdrop. I might change it at some point. I might get a green screen. Who knows? Why not? A green screen. Why not? I might just do that. But yes, so this is my permanent home, and we have even faster broadband here. I have 1,000 megs per second down, and I think 450 up. I think it's 450 up. It's something like that. It might even be a 1,000 megs up as well as down. I can't remember. But yeah. So I've been doing this for a long time, every Sunday. But I also occasionally do the Songwriting Simplified show, which I do with Jonny Guy. Sometimes I do that on my own here on a Wednesday. Like if Johnny's unable to do the show, then it ends up being here. And recently with family problems that Jonny has had, and certain health problems that he's had, we've done the show here on my channel on a Wednesday for the last few weeks. But yeah, that's kind of how that works. Martin says, to make a template in Studio One and change the sound card, it gets a problem. Guitars on in line 4, but to make new sound card has only 2. Okay, if you're making a template, one of the things you can do is you can also save the preset for the sound card that you're using, which is really handy, because if somebody sends me a Studio One song folder and they are using a completely different interface to mine, when I first open it up, I might not hear anything. And so the thing to do when that happens is I can go to, on Windows, I can go to Studio One Options, or on Mac, you go to Studio One Preferences, and then you just go to Audio Setup, Song Setup, and then you can just correct everything as you need to. But one of the things you can see here is you can import and export your sound setup here. So, you know, I can send a session which has my audio interface set up. So if I have like a specific setup where I've recorded on a Series 3 mixer and I want to make sure that I retain those settings because I have a Series 3 mixer right in front of me, but let's say somebody else has a Series 3 mixer as well, and I say, so you're recording your guitars on channel 4 and channel 5, okay, or they're recording their guitars on 5 and 6 maybe, and I say, okay, fine, send me the whole song, but also export your audio I/O setup. And then what I can do is I can open the song and I can import their audio I/O setup and I can use that for that song. And the thing to make sure you don't do is don't make that as default. There's a make default button here. Don't do that. Because because you can set the I/O on a song basis. So I could have a song that uses the Series 3. I could have a song that uses my 1824. I can have a song that uses my Studio 6.8, which is my little portable travel interface. When I'm on the road, that's what I use. So, I can switch between any of those three interfaces with ease because I've got them all saved and I can just send them between my computers. I can send them between the PC and the Mac or my trusty laptop here. So it's easy to do. You just import and export your I/O setup. He's talking about putting a track into record mode, red on red. Record mode, red on red. Oh, really? Okay, let's go new song. Actually, I don't need to do that because I've already got a new song open. Let's go back to this one here. Let's make this red. No, I can see that. And by the way, I am one of those rare people that is totally colorblind. There's a very large percentage of men that are red-green colorblind, and there are some that are blue-yellow colorblind. That's a little bit more rare, but even rarer still, and I think it's less than 1% of the population of the planet are completely colorblind. They see no colors whatsoever. I am one of those people. So colors are not really bothersome for me at all. However, I can see that this is red and that this is actually a different shade of red. How do I know that? Because I've just said I don't see color. Aha, I knew you were gonna ask that. There is a condition that is called synesthesia. If you go to Adam Neely's channel, which is fantastic, by the way, I heartily recommend that you dig his channel, go and subscribe to his channel. He has all sorts of stuff on music theory and just music making in general. He does like video essays on all sorts of really, really, really cool, interesting music orientated subjects. And one of the things that he has is synesthesia, which is something I also have. Now, how does that work for me? It's weird how it works for me. And it's weird for pretty much every person that has this condition because it just is. It's just weird. When the brain cannot interpret data in a particular way, then it has to find another way to interpret that data. So in my case, I don't see color. So my brain has to find a way to interpret that data that it doesn't understand. So what it does, I hear color. That's right, I hear color as sound. So to me, this red here and this red record button, they sound different. They are similar, but they have different tonal qualities. And that tells me that they are a different shade of red. So those of you that do see color would be able to confirm whether that and that are different shades of red. To me, they are. But yeah, if red is a color that you are not really good for seeing, then don't use red. Use a different color. Use green. Although for some people, red green is, as I just said, red green is not a good thing either. So go for blue, or even just maybe go for white, or or go for this kind of old kind of gray color, or go for garish yellow, or even more garish yellow, or pink. Although actually that looks a little bit closer. This particular shade here looks a little bit closer to the record button to me. But yeah, whatever you want to do. In my view. And that rhymes. But yes, Charlie, yes, you're absolutely right. I hear color. Which, when I first realized that's what I could do, because when I was a kid, when I was about that tall, to me, the world was just a confusing noise. And I didn't understand why the world was so noisy. And that's when my parents started taking me to doctors to try and figure out why. I was just like, everything is so noisy, I'm hearing all of this sound. And that's when they worked out. Took a while to work it out. It's not like I had one doctor that just went, aha, you have synesthesia. Back in the 70s, they didn't know what synesthesia was. However, lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of research and studies and tests later, we finally figured out that I was hearing color, because I did color blindness tests, and they're just like, you see nothing on these color blindness tests. And I said, correct, I see nothing on those color blindness tests. They said, well, you won't be going to join the military anytime soon, because you need to be able to see color to be in any of the armed forces. Okay, that's fine. And they said, you also can't be a police officer. Oh, that's disappointing. You also can't be a doctor. Also disappointing. However, because I can hear color, it took a long time, but it took me many, many years to figure out how to dial sound out and put it in, put it either in background or foreground, depending upon what's important. Otherwise I could just walk into a field and just go, ah, because there are so many colors. There's colors of flowers, there's trees, there's colors of clouds, there's colors of hedgerows, there's all of that. And that could be completely overwhelming. When what I really want to do is just set up a picnic blanket. So I learned over time how to dial back things that aren't important. So for example, the hedgerow with all the flowers in it. Not really my focus when I'm just wanting to set out a picnic blanket for me and my wife and my kids. So those things, I don't even hear them particularly unless I want to focus on them. And then I can go, aha, those colors over there. What a beautiful, beautiful collection of colors. So, yeah. There you go. I hope that helps. I know it's kind of a long way round of answering that question. Bobby Booth is here, which is awesome. Bobby Booth is probably the person to ask about how long I've been doing Sunday Night Live for, because Bobby Booth has been around since pretty much show number 1. And I think, at last check, we are on show 270, I think. I think. But yeah, you can go back. This show gets uploaded to a playlist called Sunday Night Live on my channel. You can go back and you can watch playbacks of every single Sunday Night Live, going all the way back to the Dark Ages when everything was all a bit pixelated and not very easy to watch, and the sound was all a little bit mono. But hey, things are a lot better now. We've moved on a lot. I've never seen a hardware mixer with rainbow channel colors. Does one exist? I have no idea. Let's see. You guys are digging the whole colors thing. Is it possible that your brain adjusted? I think it's more a case of I learned how to, I learned how to put things where they need to be. It's like, when you're a kid and let's say you're a country boy and all you've ever known is the sounds of the country. And that decibel level. And then let's say you go on holiday to New York City and you're walking down Broadway. There's going to be a lot of sounds that you are not familiar with at all, and a lot of loud sounds that you are not familiar with at all. It will be exceptionally overwhelming, and it will take you time to adjust, but you do adjust, so you do have a small point. Your brain learns how to interpret that data and how to put it where it needs to be in order for you to not only make sense of it, but know how important it is in the grand scheme of things. If you've got the sound of 600 yellow taxis and, 600 other cars and police cars and ambulances and all of that going on, plus the sheer volume of people walking down the street, all of those sounds are going to be incredibly loud and overwhelming. However, take somebody from the city and put them in the country, the lack of sound will have the same effect. It will be just as overwhelming. Maybe in a good way, maybe not in a good way. And they'll learn how to adjust to different sounds that may be just as overwhelming, actually. The sound of a babbling brook, the sound of birds singing in the trees, the sound of, the wind amongst the flowers or whatever. Or the sound of the waves very gently lapping against the shore on a beautiful summer's day on a nice beach where there's not much going on. The brain is a very complicated thing. For me, colors have shapes. Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree that certain colors have a certain shape to them. Definitely. Aaron Copland could orchestrate colors. Yes, he could. He was also a synesthete. Yep. That is correct. Let's see. In what way does EVH's brown sound affect you? Be honest, I haven't really listened to a whole bunch of EVH, so I don't actually know. Can a mix of colors make music in your head? Yes, it does, all the time. It absolutely does. Now, like I said, I could become, and I certainly was as a child, overwhelmed by the sounds that I was hearing from colors until I learned to put things in the background and just go, oh, that's a tree. Oh, that's a bush. Oh, that's, primroses or whatever. They're not important. The important thing is this. Those are background sounds. These are foreground sounds. That's not important. This is important. And once I learned how to compartmentalize the sounds of colors like that, life is a lot easier. But at first it was very confusing, very overwhelming, very bewildering and disorientating. But now, not so much so. But yes, I can certainly look at a painting and, I can look at the painting, I can put my fingers in my ears and I can just enjoy the painting. And everyone's just like, that's a bit weird. He's standing in front of a Van Gogh with his fingers in his ears. But I'm enjoying hearing the painting because it's music to my ears. It might look a little bit monochrome to my eyes, but to my ears, it's music. It's a strange thing. What is a brown sound? Brown to me is bass trombones. Low brass. Bass trombones, euphoniums, that kind of thing. But not all low brass instruments are brown. Those ones are, to me. And it's not just the fact that you can make a euphonium sound like a fart that I'm talking about. I'm talking about that's the color. Gotta get to bed early morning. Hope you're all doing great, and thank you for the great show. Yes, we are just about to wrap it up anyway. So thank you everybody for coming. What a fantastic bunch of questions we had, and we've had some interesting discussion on harmonics, and interestingly, how harmonics relate to color, because harmonics will have to me, that's kind of how you get different shades of colors, is the overtones. And that's actually what helps me identify colors. I can hear the fundamental and I can hear the harmonics, and I can identify different shades that way. Go inside an anechoic chamber and hear your blood pump inside yourself. Yeah, some friends of mine have been inside an anechoic chamber. I have never been. I would like to. It would be an interesting experiment to partake in, but he certainly did. And, you know, he basically was challenged to do it because, you know, it's just like there's a theory out there that you can only survive so long in an anechoic chamber without going insane. So my friend decided to test that theory. And his conclusion was that the theory is not correct. But yeah, he said it is extremely weird, and it's the weirdness of it and the fact that you hear sounds you don't expect to hear. Like you say, like the sound of your own blood circulating around your body. You don't expect to hear that. It's not an everyday sound. So yeah, it's going to freak you out at first. But like I've already said, you learn to adapt to the situation that you're in. And your brain is very, very good at that. It's very, very clever. It might take a wee bit of time, but you can do it. But there you go. Charlie Dillon says, great show. Thanks, Johnny. Catch you again soon. Thank you, Charlie, for coming. That's awesome. And I appreciate you coming. And I appreciate everybody that has come over from Andrew's channel. If you have, please hit the subscribe button and hit the notification button. Obviously, if you're in the chat, you have subscribed. Well done to you guys. If you're watching and you've not been in the chat because you're not subscribed, then please do subscribe. Hit that notification bell and select all notifications. That way you don't miss a thing. You don't just miss my shows, but you also don't miss my videos. I do make videos. I tend to make them in wee batches when I have like a block of time to make them. Certainly these days, I used to make them like every week, but making them every week at the moment isn't very practical. But circumstances are going to change so that I can actually be making videos weekly as well. So I intend to be doing that. But thank you very much, everybody. And I've just realized I'm not in the lounge, so I probably should go over there. There we go. So yeah, thanks a lot for coming, and I will see you all for Songwriting Simplified. Hopefully, like last week, over on Johnny Gibe's YouTube channel, which is just called Johnny Gibe now, which is great. It's, you know, I like the home studio trainer thing, but I have to remember that it's a home studio trainer. But now it's just on the Johnny Gibe channel. So please do go subscribe to his channel if you haven't done that yet, and hit the notification bell over there as well, so you don't miss our Wednesday night show that we do called Songwriting Simplified, which is a load of fun as well. So hopefully it'll be on over on his channel this week as well, just like last week. It'd be nice if we could get back into a wee run of shows over there on Wednesdays. But otherwise, folks, I will see you then, and I wish everybody a very nice evening and good night.